So hello all. So in this session we'll talk about the layered architecture, and we mainly talk about the concept that the entire layered architecture revolves around, that is SoC, separation of concerns. So in this call we have Bilal, Umar and Mohsin. So Mohsin is actually working professional right now. He's a junior dev, while Umar and Bilal is a college pursuing their degree. And so let's get started and let's understand this is a kind of subcategory under system design, and which is a very most commonly used architecture pattern. And if we don't even use any strict behavioral structural, any kind of those patterns, we surely go with the layered architecture bare minimum. Okay. So let's explore how much and what we need to understand from this one, because this is a very first thing that we encounter while we start working in an MNC or any organization. When we first pursue, we'll see this a lot of projects kind of built on top of this kind of structuring. Okay, so we'll understand how we can move the transition. Let's say when we work solo, we work in a manner like we build everything in a one place, and then we go and we repeat a lot of operations again and again. So this will give us a broader perspective. Like if we are working solo, then it's fine, but it will make the project difficult to maintain. Plus, it will not allow multiple people to work together, as we have source controls, and then source control have a lot of conflicts if people are working on the same file. So the problem goes from very high level to low level as well. Okay. So some of the sort layered architecture kind of helps out. And we'll understand how this actually shapes out the industry since last 10 years also. We'll see from that perspective as well. Like different techs and technologies come into picture and they are now default trend and default stack full as a part of a full stack development. Okay. So we'll explore those as well. Okay. So before we begin, can anybody just highlight what is a layered architecture? Can just brief about it. What is it all about? Anyone?
Uh, I would say in layered architecture, we are abstracting some details from each other.
Okay. Anyone else?
like organizing the software in different layers, kind of horizontal layers.
Can you give one layer name, like how you are defining it?
Oh,
Like we have presentation layer, data layer.
Okay. Yeah, Umar.
A layered architecture is basically dividing your projects into such layers that while building your application, you are very much assured that this layer would include this. And later on, if you want to update something, modification is easier so that it does not interact with each other.
Yeah. To make sense, all of you actually aware of what is it actually. So that's what we actually wanted to know. So now let's see just a formal definition kind of way. But yeah, all of you mentioned it correctly that dividing a system into some layers, and so that one layer is actually acting as a solo and another is not kindly very tightly coupled, so that changes can be happen across within these layers individually. Okay. So let's continue with this definition, what you guys have already explained. So here just some bullet points. So basically it's organize the system into logical layers. The main ideology for this is a separation of concerns. So this is a very important aspect because if you see, apart from any technical coding perspective, any system that right now it's working from the hospital management to airline management, so or whatever banking system, there are layers. Okay, there are layers, and every hierarchy people are working and operating differently. So why these kind of layers are there? Because to each of the layers have certain responsibility and things will not jumbled up, so everyone is doing everything, so that's not possible because you will not do anything at the end. Okay, so that is how the ideology is picked up. And then there are common layers, like as you guys mentioned already: presentation, business, data access, whatever, right? There can be many, there can be very minimal as well. Promotes modularity and maintainability. Of course, if the layers concerns are different, then different people are acting upon it, and different components will be there available on these different layers. Okay. Now, how does actually it looks like? Is it kind of a, let's say, is it kind of a, some tech that we need to check on every project or something, or is it let's some npm package that we needs to install, or what is it actually? So most of the architecture side, there are nothing like packages available. Okay, there is ideologies that is up to you how you implement. Okay, So in any project, bare minimum we do this. Okay. Now let me take a notepad just for an example, how this actually comes up and how this becomes actually a actual thing in the project development as per se. Okay. So if I take a notepad, okay, over here. So let's get up 10 years back or 15 years back, okay, when the single page application ideologies were actually coming into picture. Okay, let's say 2010 or 28, 2008 or something. So before that, most of the applications were like monolith. Okay, can anybody just explain what monolith application architecture was? Anybody remember? Anybody knows about this? Anyways, I'll just explain. A monolith actually, it's a term. It's a term names as, if you just search for lith, okay, monolithic. So there will be one image that should be coming up as a single structure or something that is built on the same foundation. Okay. So if you see, this rocks are kind of monolithic architecture that was built by ancient history or something. So this is called as monolith. Like everything is coupled and made with one single unit, and it is there and existed. Okay. So there is a lot of bashing about monolithic architecture that's not good and not, it's bad and was in many cases. And there are many caveats of it. But since decade ago, this was the some conventional thing that we used to follow. Okay, we used to follow a system where everything is combined and we delivered the system to the end users. Okay, so monolithic architecture actually it's not bad, I would say, but the system how it the system built upon the UI, the API, there was not much of a concept as a API because UI and the backend was kind of tightly coupled. But yeah, over there also we used to maintain the separation of layers. Okay, so it's not like a monolith. It's completely bad because if monolith is also implemented in a correct manner, it was a good system. But most of the time, it ends up in a system where everything is there in every layer. Okay, there were no separation, difficult to maintain the separation. Based on this, their concept appear and emerge microservices. Okay, and this goes hand in hand with SPA applications, single pages applications as well. So in some around 2010 or 2008 or something, React and Angular JS was launched, and this was a huge change because this actually brings the UI layer separately completely from the system. Okay, back in the old days, the monolith using the monolith kind of architecture, we used to make side application server side applications. I'll just write this one. Or completely backend means that your entire code logic, let's say when you change anything on the UI, it actually requires a payload and then it operates. So everything was a server side. Nothing was there. Some of the thing new came as an Ajax, and we done that in, let's say, 2000s or something. It get started or something like Ajax calls and all to make the things asynchronous, but it was not completely asynchronous. In some of the cases, we used to use them. So the application were built entirely server side. Okay, so the UI layer was kind of tightly coupled. Okay, so you can consider example of Java technology, PHP or .NET, or these were dominating at that time. So the application was built in that manner only. Okay, so entire UI was there at backend level. So then the microservices and Spark concepts boomed up, and this actually divided the layering system in a more distant way. Okay, now the layer division is that much that even a front end developer can start his journey and then become a backend developer without even knowing what are the backend techs right now. Okay, you can be a front end developer for even years and become an expert as well without knowing much of the backend. Obviously, you will understand much of it, but let's say not hands-on experience on the backend side. But still, you will become, you will earn, you will get a job and whatever it is. But back in the old days, we used to learn everything. Let's say .NET, Java, and the front end to back end, everything was there in one tech. Okay, so these things like now shaped into this much. Okay, before it was just layering within the application or a project. Now it is divided among the technologies as well. Okay, so I'm just bringing you from the history. Bit of a history is required because there are a lot of things happen now, even not required in the implementation point of view. Because now the thing is that when you start your journey, you have to work on the microservices. So right now in today's days, requirement is like every backend developer must know how to create APIs, how to maintain them, how to handle the exceptions, middlewares, and all these things. And expectation from the front end world is that how to maintain the UI, how to maintain the components, how to make an API call. So they are completely segregated in those terms. Okay, so yeah, so that the history of the layered architecture, even it is spanning across technologies, across further dependent concepts as well, like microservices entire concept, spa based technologies are entirely a concept. So layering system started from basic system layers to this much extent. Okay. So this was just a migration I have did. I have explained like how the migration actually happened since like 20 year, 10 year, 15 year, whatever we call it. Okay. Now the thing is, let's say now understand layered architecture from a ground perspective. Let's say I'm just now segregating them on this basis. I'm just explaining like how and what you guys have explained. I'm just reiterating the terms. So let's say presentation layer. So this concept actually layering system come from the network diagram that we used to have, the TCP IP protocol and the TCP protocol and the layers system there are, right? Presentation layer, application layer, different layers are there. Okay. So the system comes from the same phenomena. Okay. So presentation layer, or then we have a data layer. The lastly we have data layer. Then we have at least business layer. Okay. Now let's understand what happening. Let's say if we talking this in terms of API, okay, let's say because now everything is microservice, okay. Now presentation layer doesn't suit an API, of course, right? Because there is nothing as a presentation. Everything is a request response. So you can consider this as a the request response layer or whatever you can call it, okay, layer where you deal with only request and response objects. So your concern at this layer will be just what are the input those are coming. You need to validate. So you might do some validation, okay, at this layer. And what you do, you manipulate the data. So you manipulate input and output, right, at this layer. You deal with headers, whatever the request response headers those are appearing, right? So these are the key responsibilities at this particular layer, okay. And further calling the business layer. So calling the business layer, right? And let's say one more important aspect I forgot is handling the middleware, so whatever, okay. Okay. So this layer is responsible for this thing. Then business layer comes. Okay. Now what business layer does actually, it does actually everything. Okay. So let's say now I'm just not dividing much of the layers. I'm just going with the at least bare minimum three layers. Okay. Business layers will handle let's say a lot of business logic, like actual system logic. So actual system logics. Okay, let's say you are dealing with the e-commerce system. So you, let's say controller, you hit a controller to place an order. Then this layer doesn't do anything. Presentation layer just receive a request and then call some business layer function. So let's say create an order. Okay, at this layer you will perform the order creation. Let's say in order to create an order, you have to save certain files and then hit one database or get some data from cache or whatever. So you will do all of those logical thing at this level. So handle DB operations. I'll just say handle DB ops, okay, followed by any caching, handle caching, or a file system or whatever. So anything it can be, or we can even say further connect with some API, connect with API. Okay, let's say you are doing some login, okay, and you want to get some data from Google API or Microsoft's Graph API. So you want to do certain things. You will not do at this layer. Instead, you will do at this particular layer. Okay, so that's the business layer. You can say everything done at this level. Now, also business level hides some of the other detail as well. Let's say the data layer. Okay, so the data layer mainly handles the DB ground level DB operations. So DB operations, or we can say this is might be misleading. We can say calling DB operations. I will say calling DB ops. So handling DB operations at this level is mainly there in the data layer, and you can even say there might be multiple data layers. Let's say caching, we'll have different data layer for caching, file system, or connecting with APIs. So there can be many data layers. So don't understand just data layers in context of DB. You can assume that this layer will be the ground level layer for making any operation related to any of these, let's say caching, file system, database, or whatever, right? So you can say handling database operations like opening connections, and let me just write in the bracket, open or close connections, DB connections, uh, running queries, okay, or it can be MongoDB or whatever. You can make aggregate function calls or whatever it can be. Okay, so I'll just put dot 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 away. So at least bare minimum the API level, you might have this kind of layers so that your code is kind of logically segregated. Okay, so at presentation layer, basically you deal with the request response. You will not do much of the activity at this particular. So whenever you create a route, okay, so I am not going much of a detail right now. So let's say you create a route we call get. Okay, let's say we call as get orders. Okay, get orders. I'm just say considering Node.js an example. So you get request, you get response, right? You create one function over here, finally you return some data. Okay, I'm not getting into that. So at this level, normally what we do, let's say we create a connection, we make a connection to DB, connection to DB. Then let's say we do some more operation, more ops, and let's say when request come, we validate the request, validate, and connection to DB, more operation, and then finally we do close the connection or whatever, caching some more operation, and then finally get the data and return it. Okay, but ideally we are doing everything at this particular level. Then again there is one more method, get order by ID, whatever. We are doing again the same thing repetitively. So instead of doing this, we'll just make a call. Let's say a business logic, this get order, right? So let's say my biz logic is there something. I'll just say get orders. Okay, this will do all the things necessary thing, but what I'll do, I'll provide the necessary input and output. So instead of providing the entire request object, I'll send this an order object, okay, from the body. So request dot body, I'll take it and send as an order object, or I'll do more filtering to this object. Okay, that's how it is. Uh, this is called as abstraction. Okay, separation of concern. Now your routes file will only have a dealing with the request and response, headers, output, whatever the data you want to return, the status code or whatever. So right, normally we do res.body, res dot, I guess, what we call in the Node.js. Can anybody just tell me to return the data? I'm just JSON. I guess we do res.json, right?
Response.json.
Right. And let's say in order to make some status also, let's say this is 221, or mainly in a get call, it is not 21, it is always 200. So you mention the status, you mention the response, whatever, right? So it is always a request response thing. While in the business layer, you maintain a lot of business logics. Okay. So this is from the API perspective. That there can be a SPA based perspective as well, right? So in the SPA, normally you can also have three layers. Let's say we can rename them, but logically let's divide them. So presentation layer will be like the most component level UI things, UI operations. Okay, so you'll not do much of the calling of an API at this point. You will just handle the UI level operation, show, hide or something, or populate the grid, update some CSS or button click operations. All those things will come. So let me just write handle UI, handle UI, and show, hide, whatever the operation at the component level you can perform, update CSS, whatever. Okay, it can be anything. Then business layer, mainly that you can say a service layer. So you can call it as a service layer, service level, service level. When you receive basically the data, you want to further manipulate the data or whatever you want to apply the business logic. So your business layer will be happening at this level. Let's say you want to do some of the collective operation for your entire project. So we'll do at this service level. Okay. So you keep some data in cache or something, or local storage or whatever you can say, and perform business logics over here. Okay, let's say I want to populate the cart, but I want to hide because there is some category for category related to clothing. We need to hide some of the objects, or we need to set some property true or false, whatever. So this is a pure business logic you can perform at this level. So you can say service level, and then finally instead of data layer, we can say HTTP layer, level, I would say, where you make an API calls. Okay, so your calls get, post, put, delete will be at this level. Get, post, put, delete, whatever. Pure API endpoints call. Okay, this will only have request and response. Further service layer will going to consume this. So you can see that layering you can do at any application, any kind of application, but the intent and ideology will be different in some sort. Now, why and what benefit we already understood, because it will give, first of all, the benefit that one layer will not do everything. Component, I'll restrict myself to not go and make the service level business logics over at the component level. So that one benefit I'll get, okay, I need to just search my business code at this particular point instead of at the component level, right? And then HTTP calls, all these calls will happen at a one place where we will make a API calls. So you can rename them as a, let's say, UI layer. We'll call the business layer as service layer, and data layer, let's say HTTP layer, where we'll make an API call. Or let's say if you use Axios or some other client, you can call it that as well. Okay, so let's say let's stick to the HTTP layer. So in UI also you can segregate them and create different files, so that let's say 10, 50, 40 people are working in your project, it will not impact others work as well. Okay, so these are the conceptual thing. Okay. Now there are more to it. Okay. So more to it means that individual application have their own ideology. They can create multiple layers. There are domain layers as well. There are infrastructure layers. There are persistent layers as well that stores the data in some way or another. But at least bare minimum, you can think of creation of these kind of different levels so that you can control your things. So initially, this seems little challenging because now you will going to create and spread your logic in different files. Okay, and in some case you might get stuck also. Let's say at this particular level, I want to have the access to perform this. If that kind of situation is happening, you might be not doing the things right because you need to create functions and all these things to supply to this level or supply to that level. So abstraction is very important. The presentation layer must need not to access or do at any point anything related to business layer and anything related to data layer. So every downside layer is very low level. It should not be known about the higher layer. It everything deals in the terms of input and output. What you are supplying to this layer from this layer to this layer, it all matter. Okay. So I hope the idea is a little bit clear, like what the layered system is, what are the advantages, and there are many concepts as well we are covering. Now let's see how many concepts from programmatical design principles and patterns we are covering. So there is one basic concept that we have also written. It is single separation of concern. Okay, this is done because we understood, we talked about much about this. So this is clear. Now there is one more. Anybody can explain what is SRP? Anyone?
Single responsibility principle.
What is it?
Single responsibility principle.
What it does actually? How you can say
It
that?
is like if one thing will, for example, you are making a module. That module will work for that particular thing only, but would not work for another thing. Yani कि a class should have a single responsibility. It should not have multiple responsibility for it.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. I'll throw one example and I'll ask the question, similar question, whether this is following the SRP or not. Okay. So let me just get that example really very quickly. I'll just ask the same question with you guys. So anybody knows about solid principle?
Yeah, solid principle.
So this SRP is also part of kind of solid principle. I just give one example. So are you seeing any problem in this class, everyone? There is a class called invoice, and there are methods: calculate total, print invoice, save to database. So this actually calculate the total. This actually print the invoice. This does some database operation. So
Every
this
operation is done under a single class. So initiating a single class would initiate every method as well.
right. So this is violation of SRP principle. Okay. So single responsibility is broken over here. So now how we can tackle this? So basically, what we as we mentioned, so layered architecture is somewhat supporting these principles. Okay. So if you see, this is the solution. Let's say I create a separate class for invoice. I create a separate class for printer, and every class have only one job. Now you can say, and first question that when I started my thing, understanding this concept. So this simply saying that there will be tons of classes, so like many classes in my project. So are we saying that that's okay? So yet it's 100% okay to create tons of classes, as many as you want to, but it is not okay to have one class and doing everything. Okay. So simple answer. So if your project becomes look like a giant elephant or whatever it is, it's all fine because that's how we follow the concepts. Okay. So stick to the concept. It will give you the longer run. It can be easily maintained and pluggable and changeable. So one more advantage just came to my mind is that let's say nowadays the presentation layer and business layer is so much segregated. As I was mentioning, monolith. Okay, so this in the monolithic architecture, monolithic way, this presentation business layer and data layer was part of a single project. Okay, so it was same project doing everything. Okay. Then they come up with the ideology with lot of things. Okay, a lot of things had happened, and they we are now seeing the application in built in a very different way. Like we always required some spa based framework and we always required some microservices. So initially they come up with the MVC pattern. So MVC, if you remember, it is called as model view controller. That is a single example, one more example of a layered system. that you are separating your model with the view and the controller. So okay, so separation of concern again. So right. So then MVC came within monolithic kind of way where we further segregating it. Then it much to an extent it gone to that the entire presentation layer. Let me just copy this one. The entire presentation layer we now talking them in terms of SPA. This becomes a SPA, and the business layer and the data layer. We can say this is simply an API encapsulated behind API. Okay, so that's how the change happened. So even you see the layered system is now broken into separate things entirely. Now you can anybody tell me if let's say right now SPA is on Angular, okay, and there is a ask come from the client or whatever that we need to change to the React. Does any of these different layers will have any impact?
No.
No, they'll remain the same.
Okay. So because it doesn't matter because you are just changing some UI component to some another technology that this generally not happen much of a time. But yeah, let's say if I want to change something at this particular point, it will not impact this point. And let's say I want to upgrade or migrate Node.js to latest version, or let's say Node.js to Python or whatever it is. So this will not further impact the UI layer. Correct. So this much segregation is there now. Even the teams are different and everything is are different, and we are not impacting each other's layers. Okay, so that is how it is. The flow of layered architecture segregated in this much extent. Okay. Now coming back to our principles. Okay. So there are tons of principles. The one of the SRP principle. So I'll just touch base some of the concepts of solid pattern. Okay. Solid principles. So can anybody at least just give me the pointers for solid, like what is S, what is O, what is L, what is I and D? This is important
S is
because
for solid responsibility, and O is for open closed, and L was about Liskov, we write Liskov substitution, and I was about interface segregation होता है, then D is for dependency version होता है.
okay, L for
L for Liskov होता है, Liskov substitution.
okay, let's go substitution, and what is the last one?
And there was a I which was about interface segregation, and D was dependency वाला.
Okay. Segregation. Okay, and dependency DI, I would say. So you learn about this as well. Now you understood what is a layered architecture. One of the concept you understood already. Okay. Now you can further explore these kinds of concepts. We are not touching in these topics because this is again a huge topic. Okay. So you can further touch down. What I'll jump to one code base. Okay. I have created one repository way back. And this you guys can, if you all are familiar with the Node.js tech, then this might help you. So here I have kind of created this application just to for my reference when I was working. So this actually application covers a whole lot of a different spectrum of Node.js. Okay. This project I created in the terms of like industry ready project where we are doing all the quality things, whatever required at the industry scale, where we are creating the folder structure in a correct manner. We are separating the concerns with creating controller layer, business layer, and data layers. Then we are using the even the unit testing also we are covering, making this project to have 80% above coverage, plus the correctness of the code base as well, plus the database side is also there. Okay. So if you come over here, so this is the API perspective I'm just giving you. So if you go to the source folder, okay, you can see, I'm just zooming out a little bit. You can see controllers, repositories, data. Okay. So there are three layers. Okay. Now, if everybody have actually seen some project like this before, like Node.js project, let me just hit one endpoint and I'll just take one example of an endpoint and you can go it further. So let me just hit this endpoint and right now it is unauthorized. So even authorization is also there in this project. So let me get one token, new fresh token. So yeah, I got that one. And let me just hit this endpoint. Okay, just replace the token over here. Done. And let me hit this endpoint. Yeah, I'm getting the data, right? So here I am just getting like the data in this way. Now coming back to the code base, let's go to this endpoint where we actually hit this one. So there is a endpoint controller. There is a spec.ts file, which is a unit testing file. Okay, so ignore that for now. Coming back to this one, if you see here, we have a class called employee controller, and there are multiple methods over here. Okay, I'm planning to even make this non-class based approach as well, like functional file as well later on. I'm thinking of it. I'm planning. I will get once I'll get time. I'll make that as well. So right now it's a class based approach where we are making a static function called get employee. This is my controller layer. Basically, I am dealing with a request response or any next function which I want to call. So here, if you see, nothing much is happening. If you see the another endpoint, which is get employee by ID or something. So we are getting the ID and we are making the employee repository to take care. So here, the repository is nothing but the business layer. So you can call it as a business layer. So employee business logic is get employees. It is just giving me employee ka array, and then I'm just returning that res.json. And in case of any failure, I'm just returning next an error. I'll talk about that middleware thing later on if not required. So anyways, so the point is that here you can't see much of a code base over here. You can't even see and know which kind of database I'm using right now, correct? So that's how the abstraction works for layered thing. Then let's go to the this layer where we are making the get employee call, right? So I just jump to the employee repository. So if you see, I just go into the repository and here I am there under employee repository file. Again over here, now you will see more detailing. So here in the repository, we are just using one data access and where we are making some select query. Okay, so this data access is also there. Now you can't over here see any SQL class code while I'm opening the connection and closing the connection. Here I'm just sending some input that select star from employee. Even I can layer this as well, but this is just two layer. As I mentioned, if you keep the layers very less, you can see directly some of the lower layer code at this layer as well. Okay, so this is my business layer, but I can still see the data layer query over here. But anyways, the query is not like I'm opening the connection again and closing. It is already handled at this particular point. What I need to supply is a query offer, and then my result is obtained. Okay, even we can make a layer in between as well. Fine. So now let's go to the last layer, this is data access layer. If you see query entity, if I just jump directly to this point, you can see if I want to just get some data or query, run the queries and all, and get some entity as well. So I'm just opening the connection, making the request, creating the inputs, and calling the query over here at this point. This will give me the final data. So at this repository level, I don't have to worry about what is happening while opening the connection and closing the connection, whatever. It is taken care by the data access layer. If I go to the data access layer, there are a bunch of methods those are doing the same thing. Making an ASP call is very simple. I just use this one or whatever it is. So at a high level glimpse, this was, and finally, all these routes, let's say the employee controllers get employees method is registered at the routes. So if you come to the route, you can see get is registered at this point, and then further this registration is done at your first index file. We normally call it as index.js or server.js. So here the route are registered. So if I just now go from here to the last point, let's go. So I come to the register route. I come over here at this point where I'm registering the employer out. So API slash employees is goes to this one. Under this, we have get employees. If I go to the get employee, I am over here. So after routes, I'm in controller. After controller, I'm in the employee. After employee, I'm in the data access. So this is the layering system you can see. Now you see and find is much complicated. But now the changes. Let's say I don't want to touch much of a time the data access layer because it's already pre-written. I just need to use my code and understand the code logic over here. So any operation right now, business layer at this repository layer, I'm doing much of activity. Now again, this employee repository in future will again do much of our activity because let's say if I want to again do some file level operation caching, this will all end up in this method. Again, violation of SRP. So we can further break it down in other chunk. So you can see breaking and all these things will happen at many level. And you can think as per your application. Now, the thing is that any changes I need to do from the database perspective, I'll update this. If there is a change required at this particular point, I'll change this file. It will not much conflict with other person as well. Route configuration will not much time updated, right? So you can build and update your system as much layering you want to have, okay, in your system.
Hello.
Yeah,
Can you please reshare your screen? Your screen is lagging too much.
okay. Let me share. We have 2 minutes to wrap it up. Now I'm just waiting for some questions. So we can talk about this repository also if you guys needed some further session on in this. This Node.js project is also having TypeScript support as well, the unit testing as well. Lot of things like a industry ready project kind of made on this top of this application entirely. So and using Express and all. Okay. So along with the lint checkers and test cases and all. So if required, we can further talk about this, but I'm just restricting myself to come back to our slide. Okay, and I'm waiting for some questions. So layered architecture, we understood this part, and we the best practices. Okay, SRP we covered, SoC we covered, loose coupling we understood, UI to interact between layers, encapsulation keep internal logic hidden with app layers. So abstraction is also there, right? So yeah, that's it for this session. Any questions now? We have 2 minutes remaining.
To further understand this layer architecture, we need a deep understanding of this. Do we require deep understanding of solid principles?
Not deep, I would say. At least a basic level understanding you must have. So it will help you to further segregate your layering. Whatever the layer you will going to create, you might need the solid concepts handy, so that whenever you are creating new class, new layer, or you will see and notice that, okay, am I breaking some solid principle concept? Because with the bigger projects you will might need. And coming back to the development on a low level, or let's say you are working solo or something, not much of these concepts are actually needed at a very detailed way. So there is a gray area where you not should not over engineer as well, and you should not break the quality as well. Let's say you are working with people and 3 people or 4 people team, and you know that the scope of this project will be like this only. So let's not overcomplicate as well, because if you overcomplicate, it will hard to maintain as well, right? So in some of the system, much of the complexity you can avoid and take the conscious decisions. Not one fit solution will be all for all the projects and requirements. Okay, so make sure you also restrict in some area, but not always required. So of course, check your project, check your requirement. Quality might differ, quality criteria might differ here and there. Okay, yeah. Any other question?
No, not from my end.
No,
Thanks.
I'm stopping the recording. Thank you, guys.